Hello, please do let me if you can hear me. Let me know if you can hear me okay. See how this whole shebang works out. Are we okay? Do we have acceptable video quality and audio quality? Chat, please let me know in chat if you can hear me all right. If I have bad audio, I am able to try a different audio source, and we'll see if that works. But if I have bad audio, you have to let me know. I implore you. Let's chat dinosaurs, shall we? A lot of big stuff to do with them. I tell you what. A couple new dinosaur discoveries today. There was that new Metricanthosaurid from China, from Yunnan, which is interesting to see, as I went over earlier. So that's very exciting. It is. This paper describes a new genus and species of the Metriacanthosaurids, Yanmu-raptor jinshajianensis. Jinshajianensis is the specific name from the Zhanghe Formation. Can you give me my hat? It's up there.
Hello, chat.
Hello.
Oh, that's a...
It's bandana. We're getting hat pilled. Oh, jeez. Okay, we're getting hat pilled today.
You want me to stream with you?
You can, yeah. It's up to you. Diagnosed based on the following autapomorphies. An autapomorphy is a trait unique to a taxon within a clade. The anterior process of the post-orbital sheet-shaped and keeps a consistent depth. That's one of those tiny little specific things. Discontinuity in the cervical vertebrae, which is interesting. That's always bizarre. It is a early diverging member of the Metriacanthosauridae. It provides a new alternative phylogenetic topology of non-Coelurosaurian neurons. That's cool. Yeah, it's known from a skull from Yunnan. Well, barely in Yunnan. It's on the border between Sichuan and Yunnan in China. What's your favorite dinosaur? My favorite dinosaur is Acrocanthosaurus attokensis. I do know what you're talking about. Those are Acrocanthosaurus attokensis sounds as part of the sound mixing for, I believe, it was the Velociraptor in Jurassic Park. Is the Mosasaur actually a dinosaur? No, it's actually a giant marine lizard. There's debate over whether it is a monitor lizard or a pythonomorph. I'm on the side of it being much more closely related to the modern monitor lizards, just because it has such well-developed limbs. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be a snake if it was a pythonomorph, but still. Why are dinosaurs so important? Well, there are still dinosaurs around today, and paleontology isn't just the study of dinosaurs, it's the study of all extinct organisms, including those that don't have living members of their groups. The reason we study paleontology is because it represents an astronomically large data set in terms of time. You could not hope to get any sort of study covering more than 200 years in the modern day. If you start a study right now with a data set of 200 years, it's going to take you 200 years to finish it at the least before you analyze that data, and that's going to take additional time. Paleontology, you can do a 2-year study with a data set of like 250 million years. It is not a fries in the bag diploma, I'll tell you what. When you're using geological time to construct your data set, you can do an incredible amount of research in paleontology, paleoclimatology. I mean, paleontology is pretty much the only reason we know which animals are related to which other animals in the modern day. Because when we're only basing our stuff on, genetic data and shared morphologies, we have no idea about the evolutionary courses of some of the modern animals that are around today. What we know of dinosaurs is literally educated guesses. What we know about just about everything is educated guesses. And while certainly there is a lot of speculation in some paleo art, a lot of it is very well founded in research because we can identify things like osteological correlates and we have dinosaurs with preserved soft tissue structures. We know that we're doing something right with dinosaurs because usually when we do uncover a dinosaur with soft tissue features and skin and such and feathers and things preserved, it lines up with our image of the dinosaur before we learned about it pretty well. And, obviously we find Psittacosaurus soft tissue. There were no predictions about the cloacal structures of Psittacosaurus, which is the genital opening. And we found some interesting new stuff about that. But in terms of, the composition and the muscle attachment points, the kind of scale structures of Psittacosaurus, we were pretty spot on in terms of what you can learn from the bones and what you can learn through phylogenetic bracketing. So what we've learned over the last few years when we're excavating these very well-preserved specimens is that our methods of guessing are conservative, but also pretty spot on in terms of predicting these animals' surface anatomy, because what is preserved reflects scientific consensus before that preserved material is excavated. Another real reason why paleontology is important is because it allows us to predict and analyze the effects of mass extinction and all that sort of stuff on a level beyond like organismal biology. Now, organismal biology is very important because it is work based in constructing the data sets that we can use for these mass extinction studies. When we describe a paleontological find, when we do all that work looking at those osteological correlates and understanding what the animal would look like in life, we're not just doing that so that we can have a fun thing to draw. We're doing it so that we can have all that information for future studies and use it in predicting the effects of mass extinction and all that sort of stuff. So that data is very useful. Is the new dinosaur like Therizino? Yeah. The Duonicus, the new dinosaur that was just discovered, is, I believe, a Therizinosauride. Not a Therizinosauride, but a Therizinosauride, so it's quite closely related to Therizinosaurus. It is a bit smaller. It is, I think, has about the same preservation quality in most of its body. One thing that's interesting is that unlike Therizinosaurus, Duonicus preserves not just the bone that supports the claw, which is called the ungule, but the keratin that grows around the ungule. So that would be like if you found a human skeleton with the nails still attached to the nail bed in the fingers. Could a gun take out a big dinosaur? Depends how big the dinosaur is, depends how big the gun is. I mean, they make guns that explode ships, so... If we're talking about a handgun, yeah, please feel free to ask any sorts of questions in chat. I'm always open to answer it, no matter how basic, no matter how advanced or bizarre. Obviously, if I can't answer it because it's so advanced or bizarre, then I will direct you to someone who can.
Let's see, what's a good dinosaur-related thing?
There's a lot of good dinosaur-related things. Favorite dinosaur? My favorite dinosaur is Acrocanthosaurus. This thing in the background is not a dinosaur. For everyone who's wondering, this creature in the background is an Esdarchid pterosaur. It's not a specific Esdarchid. I wasn't basing it off of the anatomy of any particular one. It is pretty loosely based on Hatzegopteryx. But yeah, it's a short-feathered Esdarchids. How about the most recent terror bird found in South America? I did hear about that. That is a dinosaur. All the terror birds are dinosaurs, but the pterosaurs aren't, which is always funny to think about. Dinosaur research, pretty important to you? Absolutely. There was an old terror bird found in Argentina. Is this... It's a new specimen. I don't know if it's a new species. Dinosaur research is absolutely important. It tells us so much about the way the world operates today, and barely anybody understands how valuable paleontology is to modern science. Yeah, I mean, paleontology is hugely important for our understanding of biology, evolution, the way that all the parts of the body are interconnected, and what serves what purpose. And you just could not do some of the research you do today using the data of only living non-fossil organisms. Do you think dinosaurs would have the ability to mimic sounds like parrots today? It's possible, but very few phylogenetic models recover a complex syrinx like you see in parrots and crows in any sort of non-bird dinosaur. Did Camarasaurus have spines running along its back? As far as I'm aware, let me double check this. Yeah, I don't think we have any dorsal skin from Camarasaurus, so the jury is out on dorsal spines in Camarasaurus. I caution against it in a lot of sauropods because dorsal spines are pretty like ubiquitous among the diplodocids, but I don't know how much they are among the macronarian sauropods. Why does it seem like young people don't care as much about dinosaurs outside of fans of the JPJW series? Because at least in the U.S., if you're coming from a United States perspective, and this is kind of true in a lot of places in the world, education in general is bad. It's getting pretty bad right now.
It was already bad. It's getting worse.
Yeah. It's because people aren't learning. You know, when I was young,
there just aren't things teaching about dinosaurs really as much.
Yeah. My top 3 theropods of all time are Acrocanthosaurus, Acrocanthosaurus atochensis, Japetus barbatus, and Hemicornuta.
Sorry, you were saying something and I cut you off.
Yeah, I was going to say, when I was little, probably my parents more than anything enabled me to be interested in science. I really was not that encouraged when I was super young by school to really pursue science. You really got to foster that in kids. If you show them how cool science is, they'll love it, and they will do it, and they will dedicate their lives to it in a lot of cases. That really doesn't happen. People are so, it's very upsetting to me to see how disinterested a lot of kids are in science and all that sort of stuff, and even in adults, what is your best source that someone can use to get better at paleontology? If you mean, get better at systematic paleontology, if you mean, get into paleontology, then I would say Michael J. Benton's paleontology books. Bringing Fossils to Life is a pretty good introductory paleontology text.
What was the online course that you were suggesting to people?
That's specifically for dinosaurs. It's Rodolfo Curry's, or not Rodolfo Curry's, I forgot his name. Phil Curry's course on dinosaurs. I do like Therizinosaurus. It's very cool. I was more of a history kid. History is science in a lot of cases. What is a dinosaur you find difficult to draw compared to others? All of the Thyreophorans skulls. Thyreophorans just have really bizarre skulls. So Stegosaurus and Kylosaurus, they're all strange. Ceratopsian skulls I've been getting better at. Hadrosaurid skulls I've been getting better at. Sauropod skulls I can do okay. Specifically, sauropod skulls in general are pretty bizarre. Because when you're drawing them, what era was Edmontosaurus? Edmontosaurus was late Cretaceous. 67 about million years ago. I believe, Edmontosaurus coexisted with T-Rex. Hell Creek Formation, and it was also quite far north. Probably spread farther north than Tyrannosaurus, I believe. Yeah. I mean, do you have a favorite Gorgonopsid? I hate to be basic. I like Inostrancevia. Particularly, I like the South African varieties of Inostrancevia that showed up at the end of the Permian.
I don't think you can have a basic take on that when I haven't heard of any of the words that were in that sentence.
Okay, if I said that in a room of Gorgonopsid paleontologists, they'd be like, of course you picked the T-Rex of Gorgonopsids.
Yeah, that's you know what, I'm not going to finish this analogy because we are streaming on TikTok.
There's loads of different Gorgonopsids.
Oh. Huh.
Inostrancevia is absolutely just the T-Rex. Why do they keep nerfing Spinosaurus? Check my YouTube channel. I made a video about that. We're not nerfing Spinosaurus. We're just figuring out more about the animal. And there really hasn't been any changes to the image of Spinosaurus since 2022. I don't want to feel like I'm being antagonistic here, but I have a strong opinion about that. Psittacosaurus is difficult to draw, but I think, gotten a little bit better at drawing Psittacosaurus recently. It's a little bit hard to do from the side, but if you do the skull in perspective, it's quite all right. weirdly, Joshua Noop has like a very specific tutorial in one of his streams about how to draw Psittacosaurus skulls in perspective. Thank you, Sky Guy. I appreciate it. If you like my Monster Hunter videos, go check out my YouTube. I have a 2-hour almost lecture on there talking about basic biological concepts and how they relate to Monster Hunter. Not just biological ecology, too. Oh, I do love a good bit of ecology.
Should check how many views that video has.
I don't get lost in the metrics. It's all right.
I'm just curious. 145.
Yeah. Is it possible that there are other large Spinosaurus like Ochalia with pronounced sails? We don't know if Ochalia had a pronounced sail. It's hypothesized to because it's related to Spinosaurus, but we have literally no material from Ochalia outside of the front chunk of the maxilla, or the premaxilla. So, yes, it's possible. It's quite reasonable. The reconstructions of Ochalia are incredibly speculative. We have no idea what the rest of that animal's body looked like. It was closer to Spinosaurus if it wasn't. I mean, it's up there. It's certainly very up there. And I'm not just here to answer any questions about dinosaurs. I have played Ark Survival Evolved. If you have questions about things other than dinosaurs, if you want to just chat about evolution, evolutionary biology, anything along those lines, if you have just even general science questions, I'll do my best to answer them. If the Indominus Rex was real, where would it live and how would it affect its ecosystem? If you're talking about the Indominus Rex in the framework of a real animal with like real animal behavior, it would probably fit in well-ish with the large theropods of like mid to late Cretaceous South America. If it had the behaviors that it had in the movie, I don't think it would exist for very long. Hello, Camzilla. When do you think life first appeared? Because I've heard so many answers. That's a really good question, and it's kind of difficult to answer. I think it just is dated back to the oldest stromatolite, and then you have to go like projections based on that. The oldest stromatolites are about 3.4 billion years old. A little bit older in Marble Bar in Australia. So I think that's about how far back it goes. But that's how far back our like concrete fossil record of life goes, as far as I'm aware. But it's projected to originate earlier than that, obviously. Thoughts on Spec Evo stories like Altomaros? I like Altomaros. I know the guy who wrote it. He's cool. Cool guy. He's publishing the remake of Altomaros soon.
I think Spec Evo is fun and cool, and you can do a lot of fun things with it.
Yeah, listen to the miniature head on my shoulder. Dr. Ross Geller wrote a paper on velociraptors. What are your thoughts on it if you read it? I think Ross Geller is a hack, and I think he's far too eager when it comes to splitting species and populations within a genera, especially for an animal with such a small sample size. I think it makes sense. I'm in line with like the amyloid world hypothesis, life's origin. I don't know if you're into that. Hello, welcome up, Nubbler. What's your question?
It's not a question. I just want to know your opinion. What is your opinion on the woolly mammoth mice?
I don't think that gets us that much closer to de-extincting woolly mammoths.
Didn't the researchers basically say that?
Yeah. I mean, it's they're kind of transparent about that. They're kind of pivoting away from actual de-extinction of the woolly mammoth and more towards creating an analog for the woolly mammoth and then introducing it to North Russia, which I think is a little risky. In particular, I think our de-extinction efforts are better focused elsewhere, with species that are more recently extinct that we could have an easier time reading and doing for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Possible iguanas could follow similar evolutionary. Possible marine iguanas could follow a similar evolutionary path to mosasaurs. Certainly, if they keep being forced farther and farther out to sea, and they have more and more competition on land, they'll be less incentivized to move well on land and more incentivized to move well in the ocean.
That'll be cool.
Welcome, Camzilla. What's your question?
What's going on, man?
I'm pretty good.
What do you think about, like, evolutionary adaptations with, like, little to no reason for them being there? because I know plenty of animals have things like that, where they have these adaptations and these features on them that have no evolutionary reason for even being there.
Well, are you talking about like vestigial traits that once served a purpose and then became useless, or are you talking about stuff that just kind of shows up?
Stuff that just kind of shows up.
Well, usually when that's the case, it actually has something to do with their sexual success. If it's like, there are two ways that can really happen. One, it's a thing that doesn't really influence the animal or plant or organism's survival rate, but it does influence its reproductive success. So, for example, if there is some instinctual males of a species to females that are more brightly colored, a female with a congenital mutation that causes it to be, bright all over, and for instance, a crab, that crab is going to attract more mates, and it'll be more reproductively successful, and then basically all the crabs will be brightly colored because the ones that have that mutation will propagate, and the ones that don't. In some cases, arbitrary mutations that are rare within a population can, by chance, be common in a subpopulation, and due to either the rest of the population dying out in some random freak event, or that tiny subfraction of the population which has that trait, maybe it's a family, maybe it's 3 families that are all closely related that have that kind of useless or irrelevant trait. If they get displaced to another location and they start breeding successfully, we get what's called the founder effect, where even in the far future, the descendants of that population will probably still have that trait if it doesn't negatively impact their success.
That's fair. So it would sort of fall into the realm, not exactly, but close to subspecies almost.
Yeah,
sort of a similar idea.
If an entire species has it, then that species is the result of probably like founder effect speciation. So think about this. There's a bird species. Imagine like a species of warbler or thrush or finch. And this bird species has 2 distinct alleles for eye color. There are some birds that have green eyes, and there are some birds that have dark blue eyes. And the birds that have dark blue eyes are super, super rare compared to the green-eyed birds. But obviously this gets passed down. So one dark blue-eyed bird breeds, and it passes down those dark blue eyes to its family. And let's say this group of birds migrates as family groups. If this dark blue-eyed family gets blown off course and instead migrates to the wrong island, they establish a population there and they keep returning there, then all of the dark blue-eyed birds that nest on that island will have dark blue-eyed offspring. And then you'll have 2 distinct subpopulations of this original species, one of which has this common useless trait, while the other one has the typical trait. So yeah, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. It's kind of almost like people, where you can have a family, and if you branch off into another family, the offspring are going to start looking different. And evolution, man, science.
It's really cool, and it's so bizarrely complex, but it is very interesting.
I'm not going to talk about it now because this is not the stream to talk about it, but at some point later, I got to talk to you about this thing that me and my friend are working on.
Cool.
It's a completely custom-made, like, Monster Hunter D&D.
That's awesome. Shoot me a DM about that. I will definitely be interested.
All right. I got to tell you about the new monsters we're making.
Definitely. All right. I'm going to go answer some more questions now, but it was great to talk with you, and thank you for your time.
Oh, wait, how do I leave? Do you just have to boot me?
No.
Oh, okay, all right. Later.
Yeah. All right, next up we got Evan Nova. Do we think Parasaurolophus had a sail behind its crest? Not necessarily, but it definitely had some soft tissue going on with that. It's very unlikely that the bone was just exposed. All right, Evan Nova 2, what's your question?
What's going on, bro?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. First of all, I just want to say, dude, my favorite dinosaur is also Acrocanthosaurus. It's crazy to me. I've been meeting so many people lately who their favorite dinosaur is Acrocanthosaurus. That's pretty.
My propaganda is spreading.
That means your propaganda is spreading. That's good. So here's my question. All right, so if you look at some of the largest theropods that exist, if you look at, like, we'll just say like the top 10, if you were to scroll down that list, you would notice that, like, the majority of that list is made up of carcharodontosaurids.
Yes.
But then at the very, very top, you have which I think, the estimates are always changing, it seems like. But at the very top of that list, you have Tyrannosaurus.
Yeah.
Now, like, my main question is, I thought about it. I'm like, okay, why is that? Okay, well, in North America during that time, you had larger herbivores like the Edmontosaurus that you were talking about earlier. But I guess more of my question is, what caused the animals in North America to grow so large versus in these other places where you had these carcharodontosaurids, which, I mean, I don't know if there were any herbivores aside from sauropods that were as large as something like Edmontosaurus, but, like, what was it about Tyrannosaurus specifically? Because, I mean, if you look at its whole lineage, there's a lot of smaller Tyrannosaurids.
Yeah,
so what caused Tyrannosaurus itself to just skyrocket in size compared to the rest of its family?
Yeah, so for Tyrannosaurus in particular, it seems to be a case of a much more robust body and skull that is designed to crush bone as a hunting mechanism, as opposed to Carcharodontosaurids, which tend to have a more typical theropod mode of predation. The Carcharodontosaurids are basically all co-evolving and just getting slightly bigger and bigger with the sauropods, like in South America and in North America to an extent. But the Carcharodontosaurids are mostly eating sauropods. Tyrannosaurus seems to be mostly eating ceratopsians, hadrosaurs, and chylosaurs. And for that, bone breaking as a method of predation is a little bit more viable and just seems to have been more selected for it. So Tyrannosaurus just has a thicker skull and it has a thicker body to accommodate the musculature for that thicker skull. It's just in general a bigger, stockier animal as a result of its style of predation. You don't want to get bigger than you have to be in any case. And for those Carcharodontosaurs, it just seemed that bite force wasn't necessarily as important as it was for Tyrannosaurus rex in particular, because it is an animal that is focused on predation through bone breaking.
Okay, so that's why, how you said they just kind of, the Carcharodontosaurs, they just kind of kept, in a way, upgrading over and over millions of years. Is that why, when you look at the largest theropods, most of them are going to be Carcharodontosaurids?
Yeah, I mean, Carcharodontosaurids were hunting sauropods for many, many millions of years, and so there's a huge diversity as well. There's only one North American bone-breaking tyrannosaurid. It's Tyrannosaurus rex. And then Tarbosaurus is kind of approaching Tyrannosaurus rex in size, but it's not quite there, and it's from Asia. But in terms of the Carcharodontosaurids, there's a huge diversity of Carcharodontosaurids that are doing that same sort of predation style and have very similar morphology, but they're from different times, or they come from different places in the world. And so there's just more genera populating that upper size. If you gave it a few million more years, I'm sure that T-Rex would have enough descendants associated with it that had similar morphology and size, and maybe in a timeline where the dinosaurs went extinct 50 million years later, that top 10 largest theropods list would be all Tyrannosaurus.
Speaking of which, have you read into all the stuff about the separate Tyrannosaurus species, like I think it's Rex and Macraensis, and then there's another one?
So there are two proposed splits. One of them is much more well validated than the other. There was earlier, the earliest one was a split into Tyrannosaurus rex, Tyrannosaurus virgina, and Tyrannosaurus imperator. And that one was proposed a couple years ago.
I think I remember that one.
Yeah, it's not very well founded, particularly because a lot of that can be chalked up to individual variation, and they were basically, rather than picking based on time and locality, they were kind of just sorting the T-Rex into boxes. And so those are more what we would consider morphotypes, as opposed to actual proper species. Tyrannosaurus macraenensis is a species of Tyrannosaurus that is distinctly more gracile and also from an earlier time period, and it's from farther south in the Americas. So it is pretty distinctly another species compared to T-Rex. It's smaller, it has a more light build, and it's from a different area and a different time period. So it's pretty solidly in all those boxes to be considered a separate species.
Okay. Well, dude, thank you for answering my questions, bro. I love this. Is the first time I've seen you. I saw you on my For You page. I decided to come in here. Bro, I think you're awesome.
I appreciate it.
If I think of any other questions, I'll pop back in. You never know.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to have you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, for sure.
Have a great night.
You too.
Have you ever played Ark? I have played Ark. I'm not a huge fan of like survival games in general, though, so I didn't really enjoy it so much.
The person asking about the Monster Hunter monsters, in terms of size, Monster Hunter monsters are enormous. They, especially in the new games, they are huge. Like if you look at Deshaguma in Monster Hunter Wilds, that is about the size of a T-Rex. They are absolutely massive, and part of the reason for that is just because of kind of the framing of the game. Because you're in third person, they tend to look a bit smaller than if you're in first person. And so they just make them even larger. T-Rex, I think, would be about T-Rex size.
It's likely.
Maybe not the same.
I'm going to answer
length.
I'm going to answer Matt's question here. For some reason, my science teacher says birds aren't reptiles. Is that true?
Nope.
That is not true. Birds are very distinctly reptiles, and I hate to push back against a science teacher because I do love them, and I think they're doing a really excellent job that not enough people do, because it is quite thankless. And so don't take this as a slight against your science teacher, because they probably have a lot on their plate, and they don't have time to study animal systematics. However, the group Reptilia, the class Reptilia, includes birds in modern taxonomy. Birds specifically are not just reptiles. They're sauropsid reptiles. Well, sorry, they are sauropsids, which is a group that includes reptiles. They are then reptiles. They're then, specifically within reptiles, there are archosaurs. Then, within archosaurs, they are avimetatarsalians, which means birdfoot, obviously. Obviously, that was such a stupid and pretentious thing to say. Avimetatarsalian means bird-footed. The term aves in there is related to birds. Within Avimetatarsalian, they're then dinosaurs, as opposed to pterosaurs or some of the other little straggler groups in there. Then there are theropods within the dinosaurs. Then there are maniraptorans, specifically maniraptoran dinosaurs. And then within the maniraptorans, they are avians. Nowhere in there does it say they stopped becoming reptiles. The popular definition of reptile does not include birds because they're by far the most unique group of reptiles, but birds are actually more closely related to crocodiles and crocodiles to birds than crocodiles are related to any of the other living reptile groups. So, your alligators, crocodiles, gharials, they're all closely related to each other and then closely related to birds. And then the snakes, lizards, turtles, tuataras, all that stuff, they're all more closely related to each other than they are to crocodiles and alligators. So if your teacher says that birds aren't reptiles, they also have to say that crocodiles aren't reptiles, unfortunately, due to the law of monophyly. Do you think Saurophaganax deserve to be classified as an Allosaurus or not? I don't think the reassessed Saurophaganax specimen should have even been given a specific name. I think it should just be like Allosauridae indeterminate, because there's really not enough material there. I think it's fine to call the sauropod portion Saurophaganax because something has to bear that holotype material, but yeah, it's just so fragmentary. Yeah. It's great to get into science. Was a raptor related to the terror bird? The terror birds are Maniraptoran dinosaurs, which some people use as a catch-all for the raptors. Maniraptora includes the oviraptors, the oviraptorosaurs, the dromaeosaurs, the troodontids, all those little fingered running guys, and then also the therizinosaurs and some other groups. So in that sense, if you're considering Maniraptora to be the raptors, then terrorbirds just are raptors. If you're considering Maniraptor to just be the dromaeosaurs, which are like the ones that are very closely related to Velociraptor and Utahraptor and such, then they're closely related to the dromaeosaurs, but they're not dromaeosaurs themselves. They're closer related to troodontids and obviously more closely related to the other birds. However, in the sense of being raptorial birds, that is to say birds that take live prey, terrorbirds are absolutely raptors themselves, because just like a hawk or an eagle or a hawk. Oh, I already said hawk too. Or
I knew you were gonna figure out some way to put it in there.
yeah, okay, well, just like a hawk or an eagle or any other kind of predatory bird, terrorbirds are raptorial. What are your thoughts regarding the theory that a few megalodons may still be alive today? In the scientific sense, that's not a theory. It is what we would call a hypothesis, and it is a poorly founded hypothesis. The idea that Megalodon could survive today without enough changes to denote like a new chronospecies or something else is not possible. It's kind of self-falsifying, because all of the lines of logic for Megalodon surviving either rely on just mapping of the ocean being incorrect, like our ability to do oceanography surveys being wrong. So Megalodon in life is a shallow water surface predator. It is perhaps the most visible kind of predatory shark. Megalodon were still alive today, we would observe it everywhere. Like, it would be probably one of the hardest organisms to miss. It's gigantic. Whales are super heavily researched, and we never get any sort of pathologies on whales indicating Megalodon attacks. Much less pathologies, much less live Megalodon attacks being done on whales observed. Like, none of that is present. And if you take the line of logic that Megalodon somehow rapidly changed over the course of like less than 1 million years to completely switch up its mode of life, it wouldn't be a Megalodon anymore. It would be a chronospecies with a different name, and it would be a completely different organism. So either way, Megalodon would be extinct. Yeah, Megalodon is definitely gone. Sorry. Why are there no modern birds with a sickle claw like many dromaeosaurs? There actually are. There are 2 species, I believe, of living terror birds, depending on how you define that term. I define terror birds as everything within Chirimidae. Some people just say Forus Rachidae, but if you use the definition Chirimidae, which is like the I believe the order that terror birds are in, or Chirimiformes. Jeez. I'm just gonna go to the page of the bird. So the living terror birds are in order Chirimiformes, which I consider to be the order of the terror birds, because most kinds of birds are separated by order. Well, the thing is, Joe, if they evolved, then they aren't megalodons. They're a completely different species entirely, and they would be classified as such. Chirimiformes in particular are very closely related to falcons, parrots, and songbirds, which is surprising because a lot of them are really big, runny, and highly predatory. It's surprising that they'd be related to songbirds and all that. But the 2 main families within Chirimiformes are the Seriemas, which are the modern living terror birds. And I mean, it depends. I like to classify groups of birds by order. I'm associating the name terror bird with Chirimiformes instead of Forus Rachidae. But Seriemas, the two genuses within Chirimidae, the family, Chirima and Chunga, are 2 living birds that have dromaeosaur-like sickle claws on their feet, and they look very much like the extinct terror birds. Additionally, basically all the Forus rachids, I think, had a shortened first digit that bore a large claw. Hello, Robert Conrad. What is your stance on Spinosaurus locomotion underwater? I'm waiting for more extensive research that may contradict Sereno et al. Too. I'm also waiting on that. I agree with Sereno's stance on it. I think my glasses are wonky. I think it's unlikely that Spinosaurus was a very well-powered swimmer. I don't think the musculature of the tail was that strong enough. Do you think, given enough time, could raptors reach human-level intellect? That requires human-level intellect to be highly encouraged within the population. It has to be advantageous, and for most animals, it's not. It's really just not that advantageous. A big brain takes a lot of calories to run, and just like sticking a V8 motor in your computer won't improve the performance. For a lot of animals, sticking a very large brain into their body just won't help them survive that much better because, like having that V8 computer replace your, like having that V8 motor replace your computer's battery or something like that, it's going to cost you a lot more. What dinosaur would you say we've gotten information wrong on? And we've made major updates on info. There are a lot of dinosaurs, primarily the dinosaurs that were discovered earliest are the ones that had the most information incorrectly associated with them. Among those, I think probably the most changes have been made to there's some things that we just used to think either were or weren't dinosaurs that we were just completely wrong on. Therizinosaurus was initially classified as a turtle by Russian paleontologists before they later considered it to be a true dinosaur after they found more of it. So I would say Therizinosaurus probably because it jumped multiple cladistic groups over. How does one get into this profession? It's a good question. I'm not a paleontologist. I'm a researcher. I study birds, dinosaurs, their evolution and such. I don't have a degree yet. I'm pursuing my undergrad actively. I do this work. I'm not a formal teacher of it, but in terms of getting into the field, I would recommend pursuing an undergrad degree in biology, geology, environmental science, evolutionary biology, something like that. And definitely getting your foot in the door by working in a museum as part of an internship program that you can then continue or something like that. What's the coolest rock you've found? It's a really good question. The coolest rock I found, well, it wasn't really found, but it was a chunk of obsidian that was given to me by my lesbian ex-girlfriend. And when she gave it to me,
Weren't there multiple?
Well, yeah, but the good one. She's very kind, and we're still on very good terms. It was a chunk of rock given to me by my lesbian ex-girlfriend, and I carried it around in my pocket. It was a piece of obsidian, and one day I hit a table too hard, and the obsidian shattered in my pocket, and I stuck my hand in there, and I took it out, and it was cut all over, and I was bleeding everywhere. I had 2 cuts in my hand, which was pretty nasty, but it was incredibly memorable. Whenever I get a cut on my hand, it kind of reminds me of her. And she's really nice, and I try to talk to her quite frequently, and we're still good friends, which is great. So it's nice to have something. I like that rock particularly because now when something painful like that happens to me, I think pleasant thoughts. So I would have to say obsidian is my favorite rock. Do you like the idea of Spino being a pelican-like wader? I think it's more plausible than it being a major, like a pursuit swimmer. What major should we select to study dinosaurs in college or university? Biology or geology or undergrad doesn't matter that much as long as you get a strong foundation in the natural sciences, particularly with geology. Deinosuchus is very cool. A very cool animal. Now, I believe some dinosaurs still exist somewhere. If you're talking about birds, yeah, you're correct. There are birds everywhere all over the earth. They're dinosaurs. They're true dinosaurs. Now, I believe some dinosaurs still exist somewhere. If you're talking about non-birds, then I would have to disagree. And I think just kind of shooting comments back and forth at each other maybe isn't the best way to have that discussion. So if you want to have a proper conversation, I promise I won't be, mean or degrading to you. I would like to invite you up, and you can hit request to guest if you want to have a back and forth conversation about it instead of me just looking at your comment. I found bones on my land during family. Thought I was crazy, but it confirmed by are dinosaurs a myth? Okay, so this is the first misconception. Everything that was around during the dinosaur times did evolve. Alligators are not dinosaurs. They're non-dinosaur archosaurs. And also, my roommate knows a good chunk about dinosaurs, so...
I do.
Yeah.
I know a decent bit. What was
Yep.
What was the...
So, there were a lot of things that were around during the dinosaurs that appear not to have evolved. And the term living fossil is partially responsible for this piece of misinformation. For example, there are Pseudotsuchians, particularly crocodilian Pseudotsuchians, that look very similar to some of the Pseudotsuchians that we have around today, the crocodiles, the alligators, the gavials and such, or gharials. Gavialus gangeticus. It's such a good scientific name for an animal. Either way, they still have evolved. They would be what we consider chronospecies. They're very markedly genetically different, and if you brought one to the present, it would not be considered the same species as any of those animals today. And you can look at this verifiably. Those fossils are associated with different genera, sometimes even different families. We don't have anything that was living during the Mesozoic that is placed in the same genus as anything today. So they're very, very they're very distant in terms of their actual evolutionary change. So yeah, everything that was around during the Mesozoic did evolve. If the dinosaurs were around there, they did evolve as well. They became a lot of them became birds. The ones that didn't become birds died out. They didn't become birds right at the end of the Mesozoic. A small lineage of dinosaurs branched off from the main groups, the main theropod groups during the Jurassic, and it's called the avians. And over the course of the Mesozoic, they grew and evolved and became slowly more dominant and specialized. And eventually, at the end of the Mesozoic, they were the best equipped to survive the extinction. So there they go. Feathers actually evolved before dinosaurs. The earliest dinosaurs and their relatives, the pterosaurs, were feathered. It's hypothesized that feathers are even ancestral to archosaurs, but I don't know about that. Could you talk about Caprosuchus? I was actually... Why have you and Oblivion been hopping on this FaceTime thing? It's because I like to make eye contact. I like to make eye contact with my chat when I talk at them. Also, it's nice to put a name to a face. I feel like it adds me a little bit of transparency. Anyway, Matt requesting up. Caprosuchus is often depicted as a galloping crocodile with long legs. But that's actually incorrect. That's based on some old phylogeny. Currently, Caprosuchus is best understood to be a Mahajanga so it would be pretty similar to a modern crocodile in terms of its general body plan and anatomy. Not necessarily Evan Nova, because atavism or lack of atavism doesn't necessarily prove or disprove like the existence of a trait. There are pretty similar like integumentary genes between birds and alligators, but the scales of alligators are very highly specialized, and they might overwrite some of the like integumentary genetics of the birds. Hello, Matt. What's your question?
Yo, so I'm like 16. Do you think a museum would hire me as like an internship for like, I don't know, off front desk or anything?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of museums that do summer internships. That some of them are volunteers, but for high school students, when I was in high school, I didn't have a local museum that I could volunteer at, but I was able to get a research assistant position at a biochemistry lab near me, and that's how I got like my start in science. So definitely look at museum internships, or even just like summer programs for high school students. Some of them are a couple weeks long. The key thing is to meet a scientist in your area that you can keep in contact with and ask about opportunities as they come up, because all this advice that I give is pretty general. But if you have contact with someone in the field of science, specifically in the field of paleontology, it doesn't have to be. I've been doing science for a long time, and I've been wanting to do paleontology for longer than I've been doing science. But doing non-paleontological work has definitely helped me get to where I am now. So just try to get in with scientists. When you have an in with the scientific community, people will tell you about opportunities that are much more accessible to you. Yeah. There's
Thank you, man.
one more thing before you go. There's also an opportunity board on the website for Elevation Sciences. They're a private paleontology company based in Montana, but they have a big spreadsheet that they update each year of all the available paleontology internships. A lot of them are kind of competitive, and they're mainly focused at college students, because college and grad students just kind of have more experience in paleontology and therefore are a little bit more hireable for those positions. But if there are any that are available to high school students, I would check on that website. And additionally, you could email the people who are on their staff list and just ask about that, because I'm sure they would be happy to get back to you and answer with some high school level opportunities.
Cool. Another question I have is, some people at school today, I was talking about dinosaurs, and they're saying I'm childish. Do you think dinosaurs are childish? Like,
Absolutely not. I think
I agree, man. I don't get. I mean, I kind of get where they're coming from because it's like really common in little kids, but like also at the same time, just not. You know, like
yeah, I mean, like, there's this whole idea of you can't. I think the whole people who are into dinosaurs tend to be really, really into dinosaurs, and I think it's less about being into dinosaurs specifically as it is the stigma of being really into anything as an adult. Also, high schoolers. I'm sorry to besmirch an entire demographic, but high schoolers, and when I was in high school too, there's people are so obsessed with this idea, either consciously or in the back of their mind, like seeming like an adult. You're not an adult. You're in high school. You go to lunch break. You get there at 8 a.m. You leave at 3. You're not an adult. It's fine. It's fine to be a kid. It's fine to enjoy that stuff. I would
exactly
be a
like.
kid in high
So
school.
what? It's inherently. I mean, if you think it's inherently childish, so what, dude? Like, we're in our teens. Like, why does it matter? You
No,
know,
absolutely.
like.
And also, I don't think anyone really ever stops being childish. I
That's-
mean,
Roommate opinion.
yeah, like
Exactly.
you grow up.
Yeah, what's the age limit on dinosaurs, dude?
Yeah, I mean, probably some of the oldest people I know are more into dinosaurs than any child I've ever met. I challenge you to find a kid who is more into dinosaurs than an adult who is into dinosaurs.
Yeah.
The people I work with probably say more words a day about dinosaurs than the average person says about any other subject.
Dude, thank you. I just appreciate you.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you. Thank you for your time.
We are getting like 2 inches of rain right now, so I gotta go.
All right. Good luck with that. Is it possible that different hadrosaur species would crossbreed or live in large herds? Absolutely. There's actually the hypothesis that hadrosaur crossbreeding was either, well, hadrosaurs are definitely sympatric. They're hadrosaurs that are very closely related that live close to each other. And so there's a hypothesis that the different crest shapes and structures differentiated as a method of preventing crossbreeding, as species differentiation. Just like how birds of paradise, the males have different patterns, and so the females will only pick males with the patterns that match their species. Were birds the most diverse dinosaur group of the Maastrichtian, including basal avialans and opposite birds? That is a really good question. In terms of saying group is difficult. I mean, the most diverse dinosaur group of the Maastrichtian is probably Ornithischia, but like, it's really hard to estimate that sort of thing because the term group is so subjective. You can really pick any clade. The most diverse dinosaur clade is Dinosauria. From there, you get to Saurischia. You can't really compare clades diversity to anything except the super close ones. Birds are definitely quite diverse among the theropods. There's a lot of different species of them, but also that part of that's because of recency bias that existed at the end of the Cretaceous. There could have been a much more diverse group of theropods in the Triassic or in the Jurassic, and we wouldn't know as much about it because Jurassic fossils are more rare than Cretaceous fossils. Are parrots dinosaurs? Yes, all birds are dinosaurs. The walrus Spinosaurus is not a theory. That was a piece of joke art made in like 2014. It's called Spinosaurus. Yeah, it's not scientifically based at all. It's a joke among paleontologists, paleo people. I am excited for Jurassic World Rebirth. Did eggs have to evolve twice? Once in the ocean or again on land? Land. No. The eggs on land are an adaptation of the eggs in the ocean. The only real difference there is that the eggs on land are fertilized inside the animal in the amniotic sac. Those eggs get fertilized, a shell forms around them that seals the water in. And then those eggs get laid, and it's effectively like a single egg if it were in the water, in like its own little self-contained pond. So if you can imagine hatching out of an egg, it's very similar to like a tadpole or a fish egg hatching. It's just in a very like self-contained thing. J.K. Allard says, "Is the paleo art behind you accurate, and when was it made?" This paleo art, I did this
Last year for Magic the Gathering card.
yeah, last year. This is an illustration I did for Magic the Gathering card. It's not an official one.
It is a proxy for Platinum Angel.
Yeah, it's a proxy for Platinum Angel. It is an Ash Darkened Pterosaur. It's not particularly accurate in the sense that it is adhering to the proportions and anatomy of a specific species of Ash Darkened Pterosaur. There have been some comments by, I believe it was Mark Witten, recently saying that maybe the wing membrane should be a little bit more up here when it's closed, and I kind of understretched it a little bit, so it was a little bit too compact and folded up there. In terms of the head crest, we do have evidence of long head crests in Ishtarkids. So, for example, Thalassodromius is an Ishtarkoid with a very large head crest. In general, this animal has pretty okay proportions for an Ishtarkid. A lot of Ishtarkids have longer necks than this, but longer necks and shorter legs. But it is like a feasible Ishtarkid that could exist. It's not based on a specific species. I just wanted to paint a cool pterosaur for a fantasy setting. I did see the new Dinosaur versus People movie that's placed in the Vietnam War. It's called Primitive War. I'm very excited for it. Do you have a favorite non-dinosaur Mesozoic creature? It's quickly becoming the one that I'm maybe going to illustrate soonish. It is called Jupijkum. It's a kind of phytosaur from the late Triassic. I doubt we could ride pterosaurs, which are not dinosaurs, like Hatzegopteryx or Quetzalcoatlus, particularly because they don't seem to be well adapted for carrying more weight than is there on their body. What about pycnofibers? There is a little bit of pycnofibers around the neck. It's better when you see this in high resolution, but the neck is like fuzzy, covered in pycnofibers, and then so is like the upper body here. Ishtarkids in general generally probably had pycnofiber covering like the other pterosaurs. Do you think it's possible? Oh, I already answered that. I did not see the new dinosaur people somewhere in Russia discovered. I'm not aware of a new dinosaur from Russia. I am new of the two new papers that came out today. There was one publishing on a Metricanthosaur from China. Yunnan raptor. Is that what it was? Yanmu raptor. Yanmu raptor from China. It was discovered in 2006. It was named today. So that's cool. We say that a dinosaur is discovered when it's really published. It's very cool. It's a complete-ish skull, but we have like much better specimens of Metricanthosaurids. I mean, it's good. It's good to improve our understanding of diversity. What niches did birds fill after the KT extinction that pterosaurs filled directly before? There were really, as far as we're aware, not that many like air-to-air predatory birds, or I suppose, like really any sort of vertebrate predator birds that were not like Hesperornithines. And even with just Hesperornithines, you saw this huge radiation of water birds, which is particularly what I study. The Anseriformes got crazy after the KT. You had Anseriformes that were at right when the KT happened. They were basically specialized seed and insect eaters. Immediately they go into all these niches that pterosaurs used to fill, like filter feeding and Pterodaustro and its relatives. No, I don't think when dinosaurs died they turned into different types of tree seeds. Ichthyornis, and those are like near shore divers. I'm talking about like far open ocean fish eating birds like the Pelagornithids and their ilk. Also, just anything that was eating sort of soft-bodied fruits. I know there are some fruit-eating pterosaurs. The Gastronithids in South America. That's more filling a dinosaur niche than a pterosaur one because they didn't fly. But the Anseriformes in particular had a crazy radiation. If I had to give you the coolest answer, it'd be filter feeding. Is there any evidence bird flu affected dinosaurs? I don't know about bird flu specifically, if it even existed in the Mesozoic era, because we can't sequence the DNA of fossil pathogens, if we even have fossil pathogens. But we do have evidence of respiratory infections. Yes, yeah, fruit-eating pterosaurs are mostly in China, but they're pretty widely distributed. As far as I'm aware, the Darwinopteran and Wukongopterid pterosaurs are speculated to have been fruit eating. What do you think of Spinosaurus and the many changes they keep making to my goat? Spinosaurus really hasn't seen updates since like 2022. I don't know why people keep harping on about that. I think part of it is like there are jokes about Spinosaurus being continuously changed, but not really. I mean, there's expected to be a new paper on it about this year. But I like Spinosaurus. I like the new Spinosaurus a lot.
So much good stuff coming out this year.
But yeah, so back to the bird flu question, we do actually have a lot of evidence of respiratory infections in dinosaurs, particularly sauropods, which had super advanced respiratory systems up and down their neck. And we have evidence of respiratory infection progressing into the bone in really interesting ways. What do you know about Mosasaurus? Mosasaurus is really cool. It's a big aquatic lizard. It's not a dinosaur, as I'm sure many folks know. Mosasaurs, not just Mosasaurus, but there's a whole group of mosasaurs, and they're very widely spread. Mosasaurus is known to have eaten a wide variety of stuff in the ocean, probably some unfortunate diving pterosaurs, pteranodontids, potentially ammonites, really anything. It seems from the fossil record that mosasaurs were often voracious generalists. What is your favorite Jurassic Park / World movie? I like the first one. Is there any evidence for the proposed fleshy air sacs in sauropods? The air sacs leaving the skin is neither here nor there. We don't really have that strong evidence for or against it. We do know that they had advanced air sac systems in their neck that invaded the neck bone and were very similar, perhaps even more like specialized in the living birds to some degrees. Are parrots soaring birds? This may lead to another question. I'm going to see if they have a typical soaring bird wing. You could kind of consider them soaring birds. They have a more short distance maneuverability orientated wing. Soaring bird wings are generally a little bit more rectangular. These are a little bit more triangular. But plesiosaurs are not dinosaurs, unfortunately, but they are very cool. Could Velociraptor potentially glide like Microraptor could? There's some ideas about that, but I don't know if they're particularly well-founded. In general, within most dromaeosaurs, flight feathers, as they're perceived, seem to be an adaptation for a behavior called wing-assisted incline running rather than flight. Could an XRF gun help identify dinosaur fossils? Perform element analysis on materials. Identify, no, because I feel like if you were hitting it with, I mean, we do spectrophotometry on dinosaur bones or dinosaur fossils, but in terms of the actual chemistry of them, they vary strongly from individual to individual. So in terms of identification, no, but spectrophotometry is very, very big thing. Can you talk about the Herrerasaurus? Sure. Herrerasaurus is one of the earliest discovered early dinosaurs. It's from the early Triassic in particular. It was discovered, well, not discovered, but it was redescribed by Paul Sereno. He did a lot of research on it. It is thought to be an early Saurischian, maybe a theropod, maybe just a Saurischian. It has a very boxy kind of dromaeosaurid-like head, but the head itself is less similar in actual anatomy to a dromaeosaur as it is to like kind of an early Archosaur, almost Ornithosuchian. Herrerasaurus is really cool, really bizarre, and a very interesting example of kind of a halfway point between the running crocodile type ancestors that we see in Archosauria and the more derived dinosaurs. What do you believe to be the most capable herbivore to defend against large theropods? Personally, just about any sauropod. Just being that big, there's not much you can do about it. The ankylosaurs in general also seem pretty well defended. We don't find a ton of ankylosaurs with seemingly lethal pathologies on them. Were there any prehistoric birds that had teeth? Depends on how you define bird. Having teeth is actually exclusionary in some people's classification of the modern birds. There are prehistoric birds, as there are living birds, that had tooth-like projections out of their bill. And the ancestors of all the living birds did have teeth. Living birds just all belong to a group that lost their teeth. There are some toothed aviolans, which some people consider kind of proto-birds or true birds, depending on who you ask. It's a hairy group to define, or feathery group. But yes, the close relatives of birds do have teeth, though none of the living birds do. What was the most dangerous dinosaur ever? Probably the chicken, because of its incredible capability for disease transmission among humans. Would it be good to assume that after the KT extinction, birds took over the soaring niches? Yes, although I'm not sure if we have any evidence for or against soaring birds pre-KT. I'm sure that maybe a couple of them existed, but it's also potentially unlikely. Definitely the birds radiated into soaring niches after KT. Is it true dinosaurs had feathers? Yep. The earliest dinosaurs definitely had feathers. Some of them lost them, some of them kept them, and they tend to get more advanced and feathery looking as you approach the Maniraptorans, which are the group of dinosaurs that include birds. Are elephants the largest animals modern Earth could support, and is there room for a larger land animal? It's a good question. It's a difficult question to answer without acknowledging the impacts of humans on the ecosystem. Humans in general are very good at chasing big things that run slow. And elephants are very big and they're not particularly quick, which, elephants and their relatives. Elephants are also incredibly heavy. And if you want to get big and also defend yourself against things that get thrown at you, like spears or rocks that the early humans were throwing, you have to be heavy. Most of the time when things get super big on land, it's because they reduce their weight. And this doesn't necessarily make them all that much weaker, but having thicker skin, bigger bones is an advantage for elephants because it makes them harder to kill. Is it true that Herrerasaurus lived in trees? No, the Isle made that up. Herrerasaurus was most likely a ground-dwelling animal. Please consider that I would gladly let you do a dig on my land. They are here. I would definitely keep a very good record. And don't, if you see bones on your land, don't pull them out of the ground. Because when we're doing paleontology, we like to know where everything is in the ground before it gets excavated. If you truly believe those are fossil bones, which there's a very real possibility that they are, I would say send some photos to your local museum of them in the ground, cover them with a tarp, and let that local museum know that there's a research opportunity. What is the most accurate representation of a dinosaur in general, in your opinion? Probably this one Psittacosaurus sculpture. Psittacosaurus is just the dinosaur we know the most about. It's a little ceratopsian from the early or mid-Cretaceous of China. We know what color it was. We know where the feathers were on its body. We know what kind of feathers it had. We know what its genitals looked like. It's incredibly well researched because it has some incredibly well preserved fossils. Were there any parasitic dinosaurs? Not in the traditional sense of being, stick onto you and start sucking stuff out of you parasite, but there are living kleptoparasitic dinosaurs and living brood parasitic dinosaurs, which is a form of parasitism. And there is tentative evidence for troodontids being brood parasites. That is to say, take this with a large grain of salt. Keep in mind, this is very loosely correlatory evidence, and it is nowhere near the only possible explanation for this sort of trend in troodontids. However, there was a paper talking about how troodontids tend to develop very quickly within the egg, and rather than hatching synchronously from the same nesting site, they hatch asynchronously. So that troodon baby, egg gets laid. As soon as the troodon baby's ready to come out, it does. The eggs are not synchronous. They hatch independently. And what's more, we know that when troodons or troodontids, at least the species of troodontid that had eggs being examined, laid their eggs, there would be eggs laid at multiple different times from multiple different individuals in the same nest mound. That is a trend observed among relatives of brood parasitic animals and brood parasitic animals today, where not only will there'll be a jump basically from brood parasitism among the same species to brood parasitism among another species. This is not even confirmation of brood parasitism among troodontids, but it is possible that troodontids were laying their eggs in the nests of other dinosaurs in a manner similar to cuckoo birds. What exactly is a theropod? It's the group of dinosaurs that a lot of people think are the coolest. It's the two-legged, meat-eating ones. And then there are also some plant-eating theropods as well. I sweep, don't dig. I've offered field trips to the university. They do online daily. They do online only. Ooh. Why do scientists keep nerfing the Spino by making the T-Rex like a literal god? I have no idea where that perception came from, genuinely. I don't know about research that reflects it particularly well. T-Rex tends to get chunkier because it was perceived as like malnourished in Jurassic Park. As far as I'm aware, T-Rex bite force estimates have actually gone down in recent years.
I mean, there was potentially a bone that was found that would possibly indicate that they were larger than originally thought.
There's the Goliath femur. So the size estimate, but there's size variation in every species. So it's not like, oh my god, all the T-Rexes are suddenly gigantic. No, it's not really like that. On a similar note, do we have evidence of symbiotic relationship with dinosaurs? Dinosaur to dinosaur, not really. Dinosaur to invertebrate, I believe there is some evidence of beetles living in dinosaur feathers.
Yep.
Did pterosaurs have bird-like colors or plain mammal-like colors? It's a good question, and I would recommend checking out some papers on that for more specific answers, because it definitely varies pterosaur to pterosaur. There's limited color analysis of pterosaurs, but there does seem to be some evidence of structural coloration in the beaks. Yeah, Spinosaurus isn't really getting nerfed. It's a real animal. It's basically just being more well studied, and it was perceived as being very threatening because it was perceived as being a typical large theropod with a big spine on its back, which it's not. It's a very bizarre animal, and we're only now finding out about that sort of thing. So it's certainly not a nerf. If anything, it makes the animal more interesting. How has shrink wrapping developed over the years? Ever since C.M. Kozeman released all Yesterdays, it kind of just disappeared. Because it was like this huge essay collection. It wasn't that huge. It's like 80 pages tops. It's like a very small book. But it was an essay collection about the state of paleo art. And C.M. Kozeman released that book in like 2014 with some friends, some other paleo people. And shrink wrapping kind of wrapped up right there. Like that was right at the start of like kind of the modern era, that book kind of kickstarted the modern era of paleo art. That was like the marked transition from the dinosaur renaissance of the early 2000s, which is when shrink wrapping was really taking off, or not really taking off, being really heavily practiced, because there was a pressure to make dinosaurs basically look like naked birds, because it was like, oh, dinosaurs are related to birds, but not everybody was on board with feathers yet. So rather than substituting feathers for like insulating fat or soft tissue, they kind of just made dinosaurs look like plucked chickens. Which is where that comes from. And then the modern era of paleo art started. We started looking more at, actual osteological correlates and such. Large animals, Alejandro, tend not to be particularly colorful because it requires a lot of resource to brightly color their body, in terms of energy and cost production of melanin. And other structures, but certainly they could have had bizarre display features. How do you feel about the T-Rex Goliath? Size estimates of animals vary. We operate under the assumption that the specimens we have represent an actual, an actual valid sample size. The fossil record does tend to bias large. Goliath doesn't necessarily increase the size estimate for the average T-Rex, but it does let us know that there is a size maximum out there that is higher than we may have expected. Raiden says, when I see a lot of two-legged dinosaurs, they always look like they'd fall. Well, that's because the tails of two-legged dinosaurs are relatively dense and basically only just bone and muscle, whereas the front half, that is to say everything in front of the legs, is occupied by a lot of respiratory tissue, so that's lungs, air sacs, diverticulae, the skull is filled with air. These guys are basically balloons from the hips forward. So that's why they kind of have that front-heavy look to them. But if you put the tail of a two-legged dinosaur, of one of those big theropods, on a scale right next to the upper body, if that upper body was, inflated and not... well, actually, I don't think it would matter if it was inflated because it would be the same amount of mass. If you put that tail on a scale, and on the other end of the scale you had the front half of the dinosaur, they would balance pretty evenly. The smartest kids are the dinosaur lovers. I would say that anyone who's really into science is a smart kid, but I'm not gonna say that because I'm biased, and I think the dinosaur kids are the smartest because they pick the coolest kind of science to be into. Don't shoot the messenger. Yeah, we're not nerfing Spinosaurus. We're kind of just finding more out about it. We were operating. I say we as a community. I've never done research on Spinosaurus formally. I've not contributed to the field of Spinosaurus study. I hope you understand that in most cases, when I say we, I'm not talking about my specific cohort of research. I'm talking about the paleontology community. I know I keep asking, but genuinely, do you have any iguanodon fact? I've been loafing over them. I drew an iguanodon a little while ago for a poster presentation that I was doing about the evolution of four-limb weaponry in avian dinosaurs, and I thought iguanodon would be a good example of four-limb weaponry outside of avian dinosaurs. Iguanodon's a super cool animal. It's, you're kind of your typical iguanodontian, although it's quite large among the iguanodontians. Iguanodontians exhibit an interesting sort of convergent morphology with a lot of modern birds today, where they have a spine that emerges out of the wrist, which in modern birds is called a carpometacarpal spur. In iguanodontians, it's actually a kind of shortened thumb bone that just kind of sticks out without any articulation. So that's very interesting to see. Don't Dilophosaurus have no fins on the neck? No, Dilophosaurus does not have a frill on its neck, like as depicted in Jurassic Park. There's no evidence for that. In fact, there's evidence against it because the skull doesn't contain the necessary capacity for musculature. Why have Thagomisers not been seen outside of Stegosaurids, not the Ankylosaurs? Probably because Thyreophorans are kind of the only group. Well, I don't know if that's even entirely true, because I think there is evidence of tail weaponry in some sauropods. Look up the Shunosaurs. I don't know if you would call these Thagomisers. It really depends. I know that... There we go. I know that the mammals... if in terms of just dinosaurs, I'm not sure if the Shunosaurs... Yeah, Shunosaurus has spikes on its tail. Shunosaurus is a small sauropod with a spiked tail. How does the bird behind you fly? I've watched Prehistoric Planet, and I don't get it. Well, I'm not going to be a pedant, and I want you to know I'm not calling you unintelligent. This is so that everybody in chat who was not brave enough to ask this question understands. This animal is not a bird. In fact, it's not even a dinosaur. This is a pterosaur. Specifically, it's an Esdarchid pterosaur. And the Esdarchid pterosaurs were able to fly for a variety of really interesting reasons. First of all, these are big animals. The Esdarchids, at their largest, like Quetzalcoatlus and Hatzegopteryx thambima, were larger in terms of height than giraffes. They were not, however, as heavy as giraffes. In fact, the largest weight estimates for Esdarchids put the animals like Quetzalcoatlus and its relatives at only around 400 to 500 pounds. They could have been as light as 200 pounds. And this is because they actually share a couple adaptations with birds that make them very efficient flyers. For example, you'll notice that none of the Ishtarchid pterosaurs have teeth. Instead, right on top of their skull bones, they have this giant Rhamphotheca, which is a keratin bill, just like in the modern birds. So they don't have teeth. Teeth are incredibly heavy, and they're made of bone and dentin, which are very heavy materials. This beak is made of keratin. Keratin is quite light. Additionally, it's been speculated that Ishtarchids, rather than holding their wings straight out when they fly, they actually hold them at kind of like a star angle. So their wings are kind of scooted forward just a little bit, so they're balancing out the weight of that head. Additionally, have we found the keratin fossilized? No, but there are osteological correlates to the keratin on the tissue of the bill, and in other groups of pterosaurs, I believe we do have keratin bill tissue preserved. Nextly, you'll notice that the Ishtarchids have really, really teeny, dinky, tiny legs. And that's because we have Ishtarchid footprint trails that show that they don't really use their legs a lot, unlike birds, when they're launching for flight. So when a bird launches, it's pushing off the ground with its legs and flapping with its wings. When Ishtarchids launch, they don't do that. They swing both of their legs forward, and then they swing both of their wings forward like this, and they touch the ground with their wings, and then they swing their legs forward, and then they swing their wings forward. It's kind of like they're walking with crutches, if that makes sense. So wings, legs, and then they push off with their wings, and they launch into the air. I have watched Prehistoric Planet. I like it a lot. It's quite realistic. There are a few things that they got wrong, but it's complete nitpicks. Anyway, they push off with their wings, and you'll notice that the wings are able to get so much larger. I will explain that, Brick. I'm actually talking about that right now. The reason that beaks appear so convergently is because teeth are super heavy and they prevent big animals from flying. So it's kind of just a weight reduction thing. In terms of general wing shape, it's just that wing shape is highly variable, and that variation means it is very convergent in terms of what works the best, because wing success is so much determined not just by environment, but by the laws of physics, by what is most energy efficient. And anyway, we are pushing off with the wings, and because the same muscles are being used to launch the animal as to keep the animal in flight, you only really need to invest in one big set of muscles up here in the chest, as opposed to investing in two big sets of muscles, one for launching, one for flying. So that's already, they basically can get to double the size of birds because they have half the weight consumption for the amount of muscles required to launch and sustain an animal the same size in flight. Secondly, they have membrane wings. These membrane wings are generally thought to be a little bit more efficient than feathers. Feathers are great at pushing air out of the way, but membrane wings just seem to be a little better. They also have bones that are even hollower than bird bones. A lot of bird bones have like a hollow air pocket in them and then a main marrow channel. These guys have a almost entirely hollow center and then a bunch of little marrow channels that run through them. So they have even less weight per bone in terms of bone size than the birds do. In terms of the neck and head, this neck and head is incredibly light. These bones are all incredibly hollow, and it is mostly respiratory system, just like the dinosaurs. Basically, all the archosaurs have super advanced respiratory systems. And yeah, so that's all the ways that the Ishtarchids are able to get so large and still be able to sustain flight.
This person had a question that they asked. They said they sent it again. I'm assuming it got like flagged by the thing, and you have to. It'll be up a little higher probably. I didn't see it, but they said they've sent it again.
I did hear about Yanmoraptor. I was talking about it earlier in the stream. I can't see.
All right.
Why did their diets consist of? How much per day? That's a difficult question to answer, particularly because we don't have very consistent information on the metabolisms of these animals. However, we do know that compared to a mammal of a similar length, width, and height, dinosaurs were probably more efficient in terms of the amount of food they had to intake than mammals. Yeah, you should just send it again, Matt and Effie, or Matt and Elfie. Are pterosaurs more directly related to reptiles than true dinosaurs? Not really, because they're all reptiles. They're all within the group Reptilia. Pterosaurs are very closely related to dinosaurs. If we're talking about, are pterosaurs more closely related to lizards than they are to like the archosaurs, like the crocodiles and such? No, the pterosaurs are very closely related to dinosaurs, and then crocodiles are more closely related to pterosaurs and dinosaurs than they are to the other groups of reptiles, and then the squamates. If they're so advanced, why did some dinosaurs have to swallow rocks to break down food? They don't have to. That is kind of an advanced thing to be able to do that. It's more efficient than developing intense mechanical digestion and the musculature required for that. I know mosasaurs aren't dinosaurs. What are they? They're lizards. They're true lizards. Specifically, they're most closely related to the varanids, the monitor lizards. Is there a nightmare fuel dinosaur for any other than typical reason like size or behavior? I think a territorial thyreophorian would be scary. Welcome up, Brick Floatsmore. Good to see you.
Dinokairos, I would say, is nightmare fuel because of its size and the fact that it's just got some creepiness to it.
That is
but
true.
So ornithology question, vestibular ocular reflex, where birds have to make a frame of reference so that they move under it and they have to move their head constantly. Like they have the GNC where they're like, if you have a chicken moving around, their head stays in the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think dinosaurs had that?
That is a really good question. We don't really have any evidence for or against. It is generally considered to be something that evolved in the early avians to assist with flight, because brains just got way more complex right when the early avians started to specialize in flight and navigating in 3 dimensions instead of just on the ground.
Okay.
So I would imagine, just because that's where like there's this big synapse point of a ton of different brain developments, that's where you would see a lot of the reflexes and specific behaviors like that first emerge within the dinosaurs.
Because I didn't know if we could tell with the bone structures of dinosaurs, if we could tell from the necks, like, oh yeah, like they have the same relative structure. Maybe they had a little bit more posability in the neck to where they would be able to move under it or something. I feel like I just didn't know, because you read the skeletons a lot better than me. So
yeah, there's not a ton of research on it, particularly because it's so brain related. Even within the living birds, we haven't really identified specific externally measurable structures in the brain that correlate to that. So there needs to be more research done into that, I guess, to really find a bone correlate for it. Because we don't really have a control series as well, because there aren't really any living birds that don't do that, because they all descend from like flying ancestors. And so unless we found a living bird that lacked the vestibulo-ocular reflex, that we could then identify like specific traits in the neck that it didn't share with birds that did have it, then we could maybe start doing that. But at the moment, we don't really have a control group.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I know that we have had, actually, here's a fun study about sharks. So bull sharks, because they have the freshwater adaptation, they actually urinate 17 times more in freshwater than they do in saltwater. So I figure if that was a study, then maybe this was too. But
there are so many bizarre and insane things that are just so understudied. In my field, there have been maybe 4 papers written on the specific physiology among birds that I'm working on, which is the carpometacarpal spur. There are 4 papers written on this piece of bone that involve it or consider it in any way ever. One of them has been written since the 19th century.
Wow.
That is
Wait, are you able to like write your own papers? Are you able to do like peer review studies and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
working on a paper right now.
Because I'm friends with a major shark biologist on TikTok, John Havlin, and he is he's making a peer review study on hammerhead sharks. So I didn't, because I know that you work at the museum, but he does the actual in-field studies, which I hope that you have the privilege of doing that, like going up and like doing fossil.
Field stuff. I'm going to be doing some field stuff on a different project in the summer. I'm going to be doing some collection, but that's not research. It's kind of just data collection. But right now, my research that I work on and the paper that I'm working on is all in-lab stuff with old collected specimens because I developed a method for the measurement, or not the measurement, the categorization of wing bones from skinned specimens that the museum already has, so we don't have to go out and collect new bones for osteological study if we're looking at the wings. We can use the one, like the when you prepare a specimen in a museum, if they want to get bone data on it, usually you have to say, okay, pull the bones out. I want to measure them. And then you kind of have to get rid of the skin, because when you pull the bones out of the wings and stuff, it destroys the skin of the wings, and it's a whole deal. But I found a way to measure the bones while they're still in the wings, because you can use an X-ray, which no one has ever really thought to do before, probably because most of the papers published on this that have used specimens were done before the X-ray was invented.
It is actually insane.
So yeah, so now I have a new way of looking at this trait that hasn't been studied using specimens in like almost 200 years. So, it's part of it is a methods of development paper. Part of it is just kind of aptly describing what species this trait occurs in, because there are a bunch of different ducks and geese that have never been, formally mentioned as having these bizarre kind of spines that stick out of their wings. And if you just pull the feathers apart on them, you can see them right there, that they have these kind of nasty looking weapons on them, which I find really bizarre and interesting.
Yeah, nature's metal.
Absolutely.
But Nyarlathotep, the Duonicus, I think there's a paper that's written on it that you can actually read it. There's some of the stuff that I don't understand, like the specific bone terms and stuff, but yeah.
There's also someone asking about the dinosaur of the day for tomorrow.
Dinosaur of the day for tomorrow. Maybe you should do the one that was discovered today. It is Yuanmoraptor from China. New Metricanthosaurus.
Wait, there was one discovered today?
It was discovered in 2006, but it just got its name today.
Why? Just fight. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, you have a good one. I'm going to drop down.
All right. See you, Brick. Have a good day.
You should explain why it took so long if you are familiar.
I will. That's a pretty normal time for a specimen to go being undescribed, to be honest. Some of the really exciting ones get it quick, but a lot of them just sit in the box. Welcome up, Ivy. How's it going?
It's going good. I just had a little short one.
Yeah, go ahead.
From the Archosaurs, which was the last known relative that we have before mammals or synapsids and diapsids really split off?
Oh, the split between. So you're asking about when did the common ancestor of archosaurs and mammals live?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That is the sauropsid diapsid split, which is I believe about in the Carboniferous period. Yeah, it's in about the Pennsylvania period, about 318 million years ago, I believe, is when synapsids and sauropsids split. So about 318, 320 million years ago.
So then we all had a common ancestor that survived the Great Dying?
Yes, both of those groups had independent sets of common ancestors. that survived the Great Dying. Because the Great Dying was 252 million years ago. So diapsids and synapsids were already split by then.
Okay. Then what kind of organisms survive the Great Dying from the diapsid side?
On the diapsid side, you have a lot of the
They have.
kind of like the early, like I think they're called crocopods. The very early archosauromorphs. They're kind of like barely archosaurian. They're almost archosaurian reptiles. They're more closely related to like crocodiles and stuff than they are to lizards. But the common ancestor of Pantestudines, which is the group that includes turtles, and Pantestudines, and I believe it's just turtle. So Pantestudines split from the archosaurs, or not the archosaurs. So you have the archelosaurs, right? Which is the group that includes Pantestudines and archosauromorphs. And those two groups split right before the Great Dying. So the ancestors of living turtles and some of their relatives split off, survived the Great Dying independently. So they were kind of turtle-ish. They weren't quite like modern turtles in any real noticeable way, but they had kind of a turtle-ish body plan. And then there's this huge diversity of kind of bizarre reptiles in the archosauromorphs that showed up right after the Great Dying. So they probably had a relatively generalist common ancestor that went through the Great Dying, and there were a few populations of archosauromorphs that then widely diversified in the start of the Triassic after the Great Dying, and became very bizarre, which is kind of a pattern that we see with extinction, is that very generalist, very adaptable animals make it through an extinction, and then they radiate, and these new species that emerge from them are incredibly bizarre and wonderful to look at. The same thing happens with mammals right after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. You get some of the weirdest looking mammals ever. I mean, that's where whales came from, because you have so many empty niches. There's so much just empty area where kind of negative selection pressure really isn't as strong. There's just this positive pressure to do certain things better. And so really bizarre traits start to emerge.
Well, that's interesting that you also bring up like the split into the family of turtles, because I had also heard that there were a few convergent points in history of very like turtle-like reptiles that had propped up but are not related to modern turtles.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that look kind of like turtles that are not turtles at all. Developing a shell out of bone on top of your body is much more common than you would expect, particularly because a lot of the archosaurs have a tendency to develop bony scales called osteoderms that can then fuse together into something that is very, very similar in appearance and function, and also morphology to a turtle shell, but it doesn't necessarily indicate relatedness.
Well, do you think like maybe in a sort of carcinization for reptiles that would be kind of like a base generalist plan to go back to for survival?
Yeah, I mean, having a hard body is a pretty solid way to defend against a lot of predators. And I would definitely say that because it's so easy to kind of jump to that plan in the same way that it is relatively easy for crustaceans to get flat and get short tails and kind of look like crabs, that it's definitely kind of a carcinization thing.
And a last thing, last point was in that same vein of carcinization, wouldn't that be also for mammals the form of rats?
Yeah, small generalist forms, like especially ones that can survive where they're not necessarily specializing into a specific group of prey or a specific plant food, like rats, like crabs, like crocodiles that sit on the surface of the water and take both swimming animals and drinking animals. Um, those are definitely examples of forms that are very reliable and tend to emerge during and after mass extinctions.
So I guess if we really mess up, then we get to become the rats of tomorrow, and the rats of today become us.
That's not a terrible way to think about it.
All right. Well, thank you for the time.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your time. Have a great night. I'm gonna do the last guess now because I got to get to work and take a bunch of birds out of alcohol. Welcome up, Matt and Elfie.
Hello?
Hello, Matt and Elfie. What's your question?
Alright. I have like a pretty serious question. I haven't told anyone about this, but I'm only 14, but I haven't told anyone because I've been too embarrassed because like none of my friends like dinosaurs. But I kind of want to become I've already thought about this. I think I want to be a paleontologist when I grow up, and I'm asking like, what can I do to like I don't know, like know more about dinosaurs, I guess.
Well, you're 14. You got a lot of time.
Oh yeah.
It's very difficult to get paleontology experience in high school and even in undergrad. It's not available to everybody. So don't worry about not doing it because you're going to have a very limited selection of classes and opportunities basically until you hit grad school. I'm not in grad school yet, and I'm doing paleo work. So it is possible to do it if you kind of look for the right opportunities. For you, I would say one of the best things you can do is, I believe Elevation is still running this program. There is there's a program in Montana. I don't know how close you are to Montana, but if you're able, you can travel for it. That's for college students. Sometimes Elevation Science runs summer camps where high school students can do paleontological digs and participate. I don't know if they're running that right now. I would say probably the best thing you can do in high school is start to, if your high school offers optional biology classes. For example, if your high school is offering anatomy and physiology or A&P, absolutely take that. That is the one where I'd be like, definitely do it. Take a geology class if your high school offers that. I didn't have a geology class in high school. It wasn't offered, so I was unable to do that. But I am still doing fine at the moment, I think. When it comes to college, you want to pick somewhere that has a strong geology program, even though it's not entirely necessary. Most colleges have pretty solid biology programs if they're science focused, and having a biology undergrad going into paleontology is not going to be the worst thing. You can get a lot done, but you will need to know geology. Fossils are not just bones, they're rocks. And if you don't know much about rocks, by the time you get to actually doing paleo research, you're going to have to learn it relatively quick. So I would say take geo classes if you can in high school and in college, do that as well. In terms of like picking an undergrad school to go to, it really doesn't matter that much. If you're going to grad school, just go to an undergraduate school that is affordable for you, if that's possible, and a place that you like, if that's also possible, and is offering classes that fit your interests. A lot of paleontology grad schools have like curriculum requirements for acceptance, and while you don't necessarily have to take all the classes, I would definitely try to pick a course of study for college that fills out those options. It's usually just basic evolutionary biology stuff, geology stuff, and then some environmental science stuff. While you're in high school, I definitely wouldn't worry so much about getting really into advanced paleontology, but if that's something like I say not that you shouldn't do it, but that it's not necessary for the career. You don't have to be a paleontologist by the time you leave high school if you want to be in paleontology in the future. But there are many resources for you available to learn about paleontology. If you have a local museum, I would certainly ask if they have any volunteer options open. If you're not able to work in a paleontology department, because unfortunately a lot of them are kind of underfunded at the moment, your best bets outside of paleontology are ornithology, herpetology, mammalogy, any sort of museum profession that is dealing with like animal specimens. That is, if you want to do animal paleontology. There's also paleobotany, paleoclimatology. There's a million ways you can get into paleontology and working in this field. It's pretty great how many ways you can kind of get into it. It's really like a hodgepodge of all these different sciences that all come together around biology and geology. But if you're coming from a chemistry angle or a taxonomy angle, there's a lot of ways to do it. So I wouldn't be so worried. Just try and get those science classes. Try and volunteer or work at a museum if you can. If you find any local scientists, do not waste that opportunity. If you're volunteering under a scientist at a museum, talk to them, get their advice. Your local scientists, the ones that are in your area that know what opportunities are going to come up, are going to know best what to do. Oh, and also, if you have any more questions, feel free to DM me. I will try to answer them with efficiency and detail.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming up. I appreciate your time.
Yep.
While we're on the topic, I just wanted to go over a couple of extra questions before we finish up.
Sure.
There were a couple people who wanted to know about good books on paleontology you would recommend.
If you're getting into vertebrate paleontology specifically, Michael J. Benton's Vert Paleo books are good. Bringing Fossils to Life by Donald R. Prothero is one that I have been reading through a second time because I didn't touch the vertebrate chapters the first time I read it, but it is quite good in the vertebrate chapters, even though they're shorter. I was mostly looking at invertebrate stuff in there. That was quite good as well.
And then J.K. Allard was wondering about, let's see, if since pterosaurs have beaks and feathers,
what would be a dead giveaway to normal pterosaurs?
Normal people that pterosaurs
aren't
and
birds. It's a good question. A dead giveaway to normal people is going to be the pteroid bone of the wrist. And this only applies if you're looking at a skeleton. But right here, where the wrist bends back, you have all the fingers that are supporting this wing that goes out. And then right here, there's also, it's right here. There's a bone, a long bone that bends back. So right next to the radius and ulna, there's actually a third bone that kind of sticks back halfway and supports a membrane that attaches to the shoulder.
If you're looking at a depiction, like a drawing of a live pterosaur or a live bird, really easy giveaway is going to be if you just look at the wings. Pterosaurs aren't going to have big pennaceous feathers.
They're not going to have big pennaceous feathers, but neurognathids have pycnofibers that maybe cover their wings, and it could be ambiguous to someone who doesn't know what a neurognathed pterosaur is. A lot of them look a lot like frogmouth birds.
Oh, okay.
If you're looking at the neurognathids,
that is true.
Another thing to look at is pterosaurs tend to have either very long, thin, skinny tails without a fan of feathers. All of the birds that fly have a fan of feathers on their tail. Also, all true birds, not just like flying dinosaur-like. Well, yeah, that is also the fact that pterosaurs walk on four limbs. Any fun historical fiction book from a paleontologist's opinion? I'm going to double check that this is historical fiction because this might be a real story. I know it's based on a real story. I'm going to see if this is actual fiction. Yes, okay, it is fiction. Dragon Teeth by Michael Crichton was really good. And I thought it was fake, and I wanted to verify that it was a novel. It is a historical fiction novel set during the Bone Wars. It follows... it's by Michael Crichton, who's the guy who wrote Jurassic Park. And you can tell because he reuses the render of the T-Rex skull from the Jurassic Park cover on the cover of Dragon Teeth. But it's quite good. I read it a while ago. I can't remember any specific plot details, but I remember enjoying it a lot. Do you know when you'll be live again? I don't want to miss the next one. I'm going to be playing Monster Hunter with my subscribers probably Saturday evening. I was going to do it Saturday midday, but I have a talk. So I'm not going to do it then. So it'll probably be late night Saturday, and then later in the evening Sunday, I'm going to be doing a live lecture talking about some living ecosystems, doing some like desert biology stuff, and I will have a question sections after that. Is that on here or on Twitch? No, I do all my streams on TikTok. I haven't streamed on Twitch in ages. Very true, Ivy. I should get into drag. I think that is something I should do. I was just thinking about that.
It took me a second to realize you don't do that. I feel like you should.
No, I don't do drag.
I think you would. You feels like the kind of thing you would.
I love the performing arts, and I love, like, I don't know, dressing up fun, but I don't.
Considering how you dress to go to concerts.
Oh my god. Well, that's not drag. That's just my fashion sense.
Yeah, no, but like you like to get dressed up in
I know,
very
I do like to get dressed up.
exaggerated outfits. I feel like you'd have a good time with it.
My work clothing style is very much not representative of my my actual fashion taste. Although I don't think this looks bad. I do enjoy wearing a little sweater, and a little cute jacket or something.
Matt and Elfie, if you look at our the YouTube channel, all the videos that are up there, or at least most of them, have Monster Hunter Wilds gameplay behind them.
Yeah, not a lot of it is mine though. Ichthyornis. There are two species, or not two species, two specimens of Ichthyornis. They're small gull sized. The body proportions are very kingfishery. That's so cool, I mean.
That's cool. That's fun.
Contempo dance and fashion modeling. That's amazing. Like cartilage. Okay. This person says something. How do you feel about the potential of archaeological reconstruction of dinosaurs being inaccurate? Paleontology, I'm afraid, is the study of dinosaurs. Archaeology, I imagine that archaeologists would construct dinosaurs rather poorly because they don't study them. But paleontological reconstruction of dinosaurs tends to be quite good in the modern era. In fact, our reconstructions of dinosaurs tend not to change a huge amount, even when we uncover preserved, feathers, fossil tissue, that sort of thing. A lot of it does leave traces on the bone. For example, feathers attached to the hands and arms leave traces called quill knobs, so you can actually observe those on the bone in both living birds and dinosaurs in many cases. We have a fair few dinosaur specimens now that have preserved soft tissue, so we can use those to understand exactly how that soft tissue is reflected in the bone and what we can look for in the bone to identify different types of soft tissue. Yeah. No, you're all right. When I correct people on that, I hope they understand that it's not because I'm being pedantic, which I am. I am a pedant, and I enjoy correcting people in my personal life and being, incredibly upset about it and annoying about it.
Their pedantry has worn off on me. I've started going to an improv group that they used to go to, and I have already become the dinosaur-related pedant person in the class.
That's how I turn everybody around me. Hi, Oblivion. You came right at the end of the stream. I'm actually ending right now because I have to go to bed because there are 70 gallons of birds that I have to examine tomorrow. And I'm hoping and praying that none of them are flycatchers because, by God, I cannot tell flycatchers apart. And I'm not allowed to use a plumage guide because all these birds are stained gray. All right. Well, I'll see everybody. And I hope everybody has a great night. Thanks for coming to the stream. And I always appreciate y'all. This is not possible without everybody in chat asking lovely, lovely questions. And I hope everybody, once again, has a great night. Thank you.